Jonathan Barnbrook. Born in 1966 in the United Kingdom, Jonathan Barnbrook is one of the most influential graphic designers to emerge from the country. He has collaborated with numerous global brands and artists, including John Foxx, Damien Hirst, and Banksy. However, his most iconic partnership was with the legendary David Bowie, a collaboration that spanned decades. Barnbrook designed 4 album covers for David Bowie, beginning with Heathen and continuing with Reality, The Next Day, and finally Blackstar, which earned him a Grammy in 2017 for Best Recording Package. Beyond album design, Barnbrook is also a renowned type designer. His most famous typeface, Mason, became one of the first digital typefaces acquired by the Museum of Modern Art in New York. This is Two Stocks with Jonathan Barnbrook.
First of all, I would like to thank you. It's a pleasure and honor for us into the studio to have you here.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here and look forward to the chat.
I wanted to start from the beginning, your introduction to graphic design, which was via music. And I wanted to know what was about this connection that was really appealing to you.
Yes, it started when I think it was 13 or 14. And like many graphic designers, the introduction was buying an album. It was pre-streaming, buying an album, sitting down, listening to it, and having the cover in front of you. And it's the connection with that cover that was very important. You know, you would get the atmosphere, the emotions of the music. And if the cover worked well, it spoke to you as well, then something really magical happened. And for me, I think that's what I've always been searching through all through my life, through my graphic design, is that emotional connection with people, whether it's a point of view about something political, whether it's something to do with music. It's just that there's something which we share, which isn't about necessarily a commercial message, which tends to be another very big aspect of graphic design.
One thing that is really interesting is that you and your wife, you produce music yourself, and the project Fragile Self. It's a great connection between these designs and visual imagery with electronic music. So can you tell me a little bit about that project as well?
Sure. I mean, it wasn't until I met my wife that it became viable, because she's a great singer and a great lyricist. And the project Fragile Self is mainly her, but I have, of course, musical input and input into production. For me, the very important thing, and her as well, is that you get the connection. When you design a record cover, you get a connection with the artist, but you're not actually producing the content yourself. So that project was to make it as extreme as possible. You know, you control the graphics, but you control all the content within the music. So you understand the lyrics, you understand what you're trying to say emotionally. So hopefully there's a seamlessness between everything, the visuals, the lyrics, the music. And also, let's not forget we're here to enjoy ourselves. It's actually a very enjoyable process, making music and thinking about those things. And for me, certainly, you know, I think if you do the same graphics when you're 40 or 50 as you do when you're 20, it means your work hasn't developed. And I think I did very sort of strong political graphics when I was younger. And I don't know if it sounds silly said, but spiritually, or my soul kind of evolved into something else. So there was less output into the external world and more concern with wanted to do something that was internally satisfying, which was about peace rather than war. If you know what I mean. I think it happens to everybody as they get older. You're very black and white about meaning when you're young. Then as you get older and you realize you're imperfect yourself, then it becomes more shades of gray, and understanding the world and trying to be at peace with it. And that's reflected in the design, because your design should be an authentic representation of you, definitely, I think.
And as a designer, this project is kind of a personal project. There's not a necessary client behind the project, and there can be a limitless creativity in terms of what you want to develop and what you want to show. Do you think this difference helps a designer, or do you think a direction from a brief, from a client, sometimes is actually better?
Well, I think both can work. I think it's important to do your own work, because that will feed into your commercial work. Because you need to have that sort of space of thinking, not necessarily having an outcome. Of course, with music, there's an album, but actually there's no outcome. It could be a video, it could be a song, it could be a post, it could be anything. And the subject matter tends to dictate that. But also, it's good to have a deadline. I mean, that sounds quite obvious, but David Byrne, in his book about music, he talks about how having a format is a good thing. You have a CD and you have to produce for 40 minutes or so of music for it. And that pushes you on. You have a deadline to, put it out into the world. So, I mean, I think it's very much the same for graphic design as well. If you have a time it has to be finished by, and also a restriction. I mean, for me, one of the healthiest things is a client has no money. That's not healthy in terms of making a living, but it's healthy in terms of, they've only got 2 colors for the print budget and the small, cheap piece of paper. And if you look through history, the best graphic design is done with those restrictions. You look at the work by the constructivists, you look at the Dardaists, you look at all the work which has been used in political protest. It's not embossed with gold foil like a super expensive business card. We want to get that message out there. We want to do it now, and we want to do it in the cheapest and the best way possible. So I think, the worst project off is when people phone you up and they say, we would like you to work with you. It doesn't have that happen that often. We'd like to work with you. I say, great. What would you like to do? And they say, well, you can do anything. And you think, oh, fuck, I can't give me anything to do. Because there's no problem to solve. And I think one thing which is common to a design and a wider level of a lot of creativity is that there needs to be a creative problem to solve, whether it's putting out a message, whether it's trying to communicate an emotion, but there needs to be a tangible thing to evolve you and the visual work. Otherwise, you're just kind of making noise, and that is not satisfying on a personal level, I think.
True. And talking about your collaboration with musicians, we definitely have to talk about your work with David Bowie. I wanted to know, how did that collaboration actually started? I think the first album cover you've done is Heathen in 2002. So I wanted to know how this collaboration actually started.
Well, he phoned me up, which is
Wow.
get a call from David Bowie.
What a phone call.
Yes. And could hardly believe it was him, actually. Well, I've been somebody doing an impression of him or pretending. But he had seen a piece of work I'd done with an artist, British artist called Damien Hirst, a book, and he was interested in, he'd come to London, he was interested in working with London designers, a book for his wife, Iman, on her career. And so he phoned up, said, can I come round? And he was extremely charming when he did. And then he asked me later on to work on the book. And of course I said yes. And it wasn't just yes because I wanted to do the project. It was yes because I love David Bowie's music and I saw it as potential to work with him on other projects. And one thing that, if any young designers are listening to this, the best way to maintain your business or your practice is to get repeat business. Now I'm saying in a very pragmatic way, but what I'm trying to say is that if people enjoy the experience of working with you, they'll come back. And this is not something that's taught at college. Yes. They talk about at college, you're told how to put your portfolio together and possibly the market you want to go for. I don't even agree with that. But what I especially don't like is the fact that nobody's asked to work on their personality of how they work with people. So that doesn't mean to say you have to be a yes person, go, yes, everything's great. Yes, I'll do whatever you say. What it means is that people have to have an interesting experience working with you and come away with positive energy rather than negative energy. So if you make each job a real grind and you may get a piece of design work out of it, but actually nobody's enjoyed the experience, it's actually not been worth doing as far as I'm concerned. And I think actually Bowie was a very good example of that, because I think every project I worked on, of course, there is pressure to do something good, but the main thing was that it was an enjoyable experience. It was fun. We had stupid jokes and that kind of thing along the way. And I felt pressurized, but I don't recall ever it a situation turning nasty. And if you didn't like something, there was always a good way of explaining it and a respectful way of explaining it. If I didn't like something that he suggested, I'd do the same. I think it's a very rare skill. And I think graphic designers have to learn that as well, working with clients, really. So, well, of course, some clients really do test that, I have to say.
Yeah. Yes. It's meditation plus good communication. I think that's the key, I would say. The design itself, I think the beauty of it, like what I'm thinking, you've done a lot of projects for David Bowie, even after him passing away. But the 4 album covers that I'm thinking right now is the Heathen, the Reality, the Next Day, and Star. Especially on the Next Day, from my understanding, Next Day was kind of a secret project when you were working on it, because it was after like a 10-year hiatus from him being in the music industry. And you came with that beautifully bold white square in the center. How did you come up with that idea? And usually what I'm really interested to know about is it your interpretation of that music, or was it an idea from David Bowie himself that you developed into this final artwork?
Well, first it's great fun working on something in secret like a David Bowie album. I have to say, when you meet the fans and they go, "Oh, David's not done it," and you think,
I know.
I know," but you couldn't tell them. And of course, you're the coolest kid in the school when
Yes.
when people find out, you'll be keeping it secret for ages. I mean, I think the cover was a dialogue between myself and David Bowie. Really, it's not like there's a presentation and he would respond. And the first conversations, he lived in New York, I live in London. The first conversations were very much here's a thought. And the first thought was, just to tell you how we got to the cover, the first thought, he sent me a photo of him from the 1970s and said, "Do something with this photograph. I don't care what it is. Didn't even say it that abruptly. So let's work on this photograph." And I couldn't get it right. I kept processing it and putting typography on it, and I sent it to him, and he said, "It doesn't work." And I said, "I know it doesn't work. I think it's very important not to be afraid that when you're working close to someone to say when you've not got it right." And so then he suggested that I turn the image upside down, and then that spurred the thought of, how do we subvert this idea, people's idea of David Bowie, and how do we subvert the idea of a record cover? Because, he was one of the most photographed people in the 20th century, really. And every time a new album comes out, what people expect, especially his fans, although I do love them, is a nice picture of David Bowie on the front with a bit of time saying David Bowie. That's it.
Yeah.
And that's what record companies are very happy with, usually. But, he never gave people what they expected. He changed from album to album, much the annoyance of his fans sometimes, very much the annoyance of the record company. So we were determined not to do that, especially after 10 years. He's a different person from when he did his last album completely. So since he sent me an image from the past, and actually some of the songs are referring to the past, it's very much, how do we subvert that image, and how do we go through all the images that have appeared of him in the past and subvert them? And then specifically, if this is an album cover, do we look at the album covers and subvert them? So I did basically go through every record cover that he had appeared on and worked on it. And somehow, from the connection of the music, specifically things like Where Are We Now, where he's talking about his ideas in Berlin, and also the pose of him on the cover of Heroes. Just for the people who haven't seen it, it's basically the cover of Heroes, album 1977, with a white square at the top. So that album and his pose just seemed the right one to use to interject with the process of people looking at an album cover and seeing a nice picture of the artist and listening to the music. That first thing that I did when I was younger, wanted to interrupt that and interrupt the expectation of it. And even I think it was a brave cover. And I did have quite a few conversations with David Bowie about whether we should go ahead with it. And in the end, he was the one that said, "We've got to do this." And I said, some people are going to hate it. He said, yes, don't worry about it. And, you know, the important thing is that people started talking about an album cover again. And that hadn't happened for a while because, you know, there was a real heyday with the work of Hypnosis in the 70s, you know, stuff like Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. Those kind of album covers, and Peter Saville and Malcolm Garrett and Neville Brody in the 80s, doing fantastic album covers, which were really meaningful, but it'd been lost a bit, I think. And I hope not that album Next Day is responsible for reviving it, but I hope that there was some discussion there where there wasn't before. And people were very vocal to me, you know, quite rude. But, you know, you've got to have faith in your own ideas. And I think out of all the work I did for him, that is the most original thing.
That's sweet. And the guerrilla campaigning behind it is just, it's such a good design. It's such a good identity. And I've heard in one of your interviews, you mentioned that David Bowie himself actually cared about the identity of an artist, whether what he's wearing on the stage, the music on the album, and the cover of album.
Yes.
So that basically is showing, like, that album cover is basically showing his character at that stage, his music at that stage. So that's another level of beauty that whole thing has.
Yes, and I think Bowie was, you know, I've worked with other big artists, and the best ones talk to you directly. You know, there's no marketing person from the record company involved, and there's no, you know, entourage of assistants. They get on the phone to you because it's that direct energy of understanding them and them understanding you, because you have to be acknowledged as, you know, you're not a machine, you're making creative decisions. So it's very important that that is all direct. And I'm sure Bowie worked with all these musicians in that way. So yeah, and the other thing, I mean, it's something I learned on the Next Day, but took over to Blackstar, which was, you know, that thing about the 70s and 80s, the record cover was, you know, it was just this square, and maybe they would do an advert in a music paper, which was the record cover or the band. But now it has to be a whole, I hate to use this word, whole branding system.
Yes.
So it's not just the record cover. The record cover is part of a kit of parts, which have to do with streaming. You know, it has to work as that little square. It has to do with advertising. It has to do with being on a website. It has to work well scaling for email. And something I really learned on the Next Day, which is you have to have audience participation as well. You can't just present this to people. So the white square was used in an advertising campaign, and it was pasted over other adverts to interject in the same way we had with the cover. But also people started doing it on Twitter, which I didn't expect, you know, on X, sorry. I hate Elon Musk.
Yes.
So on social media, people started putting white squares over their faces, and that was a real learning process. So for Blackstar, that was all integrated. You know, the social media was part of it with the shareable graphics and the open source typeface. So it also, I mean, that, I hope I'm not going too far off what the question is, but this idea of the fan being given stuff by the record company and then accepting it and then not participating further is really unfair. I think it's kind of, you know, a dinosaur attitude. So the record company is at the top, artist is with them, and it's showered down to the fans.
Yeah.
And that was because when I did Heathen, somebody had done a tattoo on their neck of the logo, and I wrote to them and asked them for a picture of it. And they didn't answer me for ages. And the reason they didn't answer me, because I wrote to them again, was they were worried they were going to be prosecuted for copyright. And that is a ridiculous position to be in if you're a music fan. So for Blackstar, we made sure that all the stuff was Creative Commons, meaning that you could use it for non-commercial purposes how you liked. And that was something I discussed with David Bowie as well. It was really important that there was some feeling of inclusivity rather than just being served up the record and the graphics as a complete package, and not being able to really show your love for the artist, really. So.
And Blackstar, as you mentioned, like famously it won Grammy awards for the best packaging design. Was Blackstar the last collaboration that you did with David Bowie himself?
Yes. I mean, it came out. He passed away shortly after it came out. So, I mean, we were talking, a couple of weeks before that. So, I mean, I was involved in a lot of it. I was involved with the V&A exhibition as well. David Bowie is on the curating panel plus some of the graphics. And it was always nice that he came back to me. He could work with any designer in the world, but he chose to be loyal and come back to me for 4 albums, which I'm very thankful for. So.
And one thing amazing about his designs is that a lot of time you use your own typefaces on the cover albums, on the branding throughout your portfolio. What is it about typefaces that makes you think? Was it because of the lack of the font or typeface that you wanted to use, that it was out there, or was it just this desire to design a new typeface?
It extends to an overall view, but for Bowie specifically, or any musician, when they release an album, there's a new universe there, especially with someone with the stature of Bowie. The world in a strange way is different before he released Ziggy Stardust or Heroes or whatever. And you have to accommodate that new sonic world with a visual world as well. I mean, you don't have to absolutely state what that sonic world is within it, but what you have to do is acknowledge that something is there that wasn't there before. So it felt right for David to always produce something new in terms of a typeface, because it's a new language, really. So for Heathen, it was partly existing typeface. We drew new elements for it. Reality was an existing typeface, but it wasn't until we got to the next day, when there had been that 10-year gap, I really felt like it should have something which was appropriate to it. And, I find graphic design quite irritating. I think the best designers are not the ones who spend all the time consumed in the world of graphic design, but can step out of it and go, God, that's annoying, So the next day is also an undesigned cover, as it were. I mean, it is very designed, but it's consciously designed to look undesigned. And that's the same with the typeface, really. It's a new typeface, but it was kind of a faux corporate font, as it were. I don't know if you know the heritage of where it comes from, but actually it's taken from North Korean Airlines, Air Koryo, which is, we always look for projects to create typefaces with. And we were looking at different dictators' airlines, because there's something weird there that a dictator as an airline can't actually go anywhere. You're in a dictatorship.
Yeah.
But also because they have this enclosed universe. The most fascinating thing about communism for me, before it ended in 1989, was that it was a parallel universe, like the universe we're talking about for music, but a parallel universe where all these aesthetics and design principles and philosophies happened in parallel to our own, with a different overall ideology, whether it's capitalism, communism, consumerism, and as a result, that world was different. So when you look at work from a dictatorship, because it's an enclosed universe, it's strange. It's not like it could be. It's like, if this world went wrong, this is how it could be. So although the next day font looks very simple, there's a stencil version which is much closer to the original Air Koryo typeface. But that was designed to be something very simple and undesigned for the album based on that. So, yeah.
And one of the most famous fonts and typefaces that you design is Mason. And I'm going to give a bad example for the use of that font, which is on the casino, Donald Trump casino, Taj Mahal casino. I think, because I say that, because I want to segue into this amazing story that I wanted our audience to hear about, that your studio was involved in designing the book of All Things Trump, which is, it's not a book that is flattering to him or praises him or something, but that photo of him holding the picture, I wanted to know, what was your reaction of that when you got that picture and you heard that happened?
Well, first I should say about a bad use of my typeface. I mean, I think you should, I like Comic Sans, for instance, because designers get annoyed about it everywhere. Actually, I get annoyed about it sometimes, but I like the fact that it goes against all taste and design principle, and it's there because people want to use it. To me, that's very human. Maybe not the most beautiful, when you see it in situ, but, and I think I never really get annoyed when I see a bad use of it, unless it's something that's close to what I would do, but it's not. If it's used in a completely weird and interesting way or unexpected way, even badly, then I'm extremely happy that people have selected it and thought about it and used it in some way. For instance, Mason. I don't know if you know about Northern Ireland in Britain, but it's a disputed territory between the Catholics and Protestants. And when I went there, both sides were using it as a sort of symbol of their nationalism, which I found was quite bizarre. Some people thought it was a Celtic Catholic font, and some people thought it was very Protestant, loyalist, king-loving font. So I love that kind of thing, and also, if you thought it was relevant enough, could you use it? I've forgotten the second part of the question.
That I wanted to know about your reaction when you saw that the picture of Donald Trump holding that book.
Right. Yes, of course. Yes, very important. I mean, I laughed like I do. I mean, I wasn't surprised. And that is a part of the reason that I've had such trouble doing political work, because critique doesn't work with these modern politicians. You can't parody or be satirical, because everything is part of their journey towards where they want to get, whether it's good or bad. And that picture of Donald Trump holding a book, which is obviously against him, and him smiling, it just shows that it's consumed everything. As long as it's part of his narrative, then everything's okay. He's successful. So, I was just amazed that he got to find it, and it was a very funny picture. But of course, I'm not looking forward to the next few years of my mental health with Donald Trump.
At least that picture itself is part of the branding of the book. Like, that picture can be in the book itself, because just the image or just those branding and his name was enough for him to take it up and take a picture with it.
Yes.
And that's what the book is trying to show.
Yes. And there's a spread there with, there are two versions of Time magazine, one with Hillary Clinton and one with him on. And he signed the Hillary Clinton one as well. And that is strange. But again, it's because it's all part of his narrative towards where he wants to get. He doesn't care that there's a negative shown there. It's all actually success in the end.
Hey everyone, Sajjad here. First of all, thank you for listening to the podcast. I wanted to quickly let you know about our merch drops. Right now, I'm wearing one of our designs, which I really like, which is about when designers end up doing everything, from design to copy to video and even social media. Our merch store is full of cool designs, specially made for graphic designers to wear. So make sure you check out our merch store. Also, our website is up. ToozeStudio.com is live. Our website now has the complete archive of Tooze Studio videos, Tooze Talks episodes, and exclusive interviews and articles only available on ToozeStudio.com. So make sure you check out our new website. And finally, if you want to support us and you like what we are making and you want to actually help us to be able to create more content like this, you can join Tooze Studio on our Patreon account. You can also get discounts on our merch by joining our Patreon account. Now back to the episode. And talking about bad design, you have a great project that you've done with Banksy for cruel designs, and deliberately you had to do bad designs to reference governmental designs. I wanted to know, what was that like, to deliberately creating bad designs?
Some people would say I deliberately create bad designs all the time. I mean, I think it was interesting because Cruel Designs, just to explain, it was part of Dismaland, which was an art exhibition that Banksy had in Weston-super-Mare, a coastal town in the UK, a few years ago. And the point of the exhibition, which was with a curator called Gang Grindon, was that we often think of design as utopian, making the world a better place, improving people's conditions of living or making life easier. But this small exhibition, which was on a bus, which could be driven around, specifically showed design which made the world more inhumane. For instance, the history inside it showed the history of border enclosure, of how immigrants were contained, how people were stopped to get into certain places. There was, I remember there was spikes, which are put outside buildings to stop homeless sleeping. So these are all negatives, and ask people to think about the role of design. And, evil happens in the banalest of, the banality of evil. Evil happens in the banalest of places, in these offices that make missiles, that decide on using chemical weapons, that decide on limiting people's movement and treating them inhumane. They're not done by baddies who are dressed in a black cloak and laughing and wringing their hands. They're done by executives. So really the design of it underplayed itself. It was the banality of Microsoft Word documents and Post-it notes, because that's where all that stuff is done, really. It was quite important. And, working with Banksy is an interesting experience.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, was there a client brief, or you were talking with like a silhouette or something?
No, I mean, the curator would talk to him, and we would get messages. I mean, I don't say too much about it. It's much more interesting that people don't know who he is than they do know who.
Yeah, I think it's part of the story itself.
Yes. And I think I'll be honest, Banksy has his flaws. There are aspects of him I don't like. But what I think is important is that we need somebody in the mainstream media to represent subversion or protest. And I think he has that role. People understand, all the people who can see the messages, where people understand that the world isn't as it should be, and it isn't as the world politicians say it should be. So he has an important role for that, I think.
Yes, similar to that project, throughout your career, you've been involved as a designer and used design as a visual language for your involvement in political issues and political topics. Personally, I really, really believe in the same concept, that a designer should use their talent and their creativity in order to enter these discussions as a designer, not just as a citizen, but as a designer, and they can use this design and the power of design to be involved in these discussions. But I wanted to know, do you think being involved as a designer in political issues, do you think it's a must for designers? Because for me personally, sometimes it balances this corporate life that we have to make money out of.
Yes. I mean, what you said there, into the end of what you're saying about balancing life, designers won't say it. They say they're not political, which is rubbish. But design is political. If you choose to work for a corporate client, if you choose to put out a message in a certain way to encourage people to buy something, that is political. So in design, it's seen as that's how it is. So it's almost invisible. But there are other paths to follow. And the reason capitalism uses design is because it's a very, very effective tool. It sells people stuff. But the other side of that is that it's very effective to put over messages. So if you have those skills, why not do them for something you believe in? So I think, of course, we have to be realistic. It is a balance, but not to say anything, I think, is a crime as well. Of course, in certain cultures, it's very difficult. But I think if we're talking about in, say, Europe, definitely there is a need for designers who care. And what I worry about in my lifetime is that the focus of design has narrowed and narrowed until the discussion has stopped about politics. And people just think, well, I have to have a good portfolio and I have to get a job and I'd like to have these big clients. When really the lifeblood of graphic design is subversion, whether it's doing a flyer for a nightclub or making a political statement. All creativity comes from when people believe something and they want to express it visually. So I think it's important to have those things, and I think it's important to understand that you're political and you should be looking at those kind of things. Not you personally, but that anybody listening to this should be thinking about how they can use their talents, because it'll actually make your work better. You'll find your life more fulfilling, I think, definitely. So,
And the emotion behind it, for example, I give you an example, like I'm Iranian, and when there was protests and stuff like that happening in Iran, I couldn't go there, but I did a poster design, and in a couple of days I've seen the poster in the streets, and I couldn't get that feeling from anything else but that design.
yeah. Graphic designers are desperate to be found useful, because working for a client and doing a mobile phone ad or doing a book, which 1,000 people would buy, not many, it's a nice process. But to be on the streets and to see people responding and using it is the most amazing feeling in the world. It's very direct. I remember when I worked with Occupy London, they started using the logo I designed for them and some of the typefaces. It was one of the best moments of my life. Not through ego, just that I felt, that idea of almost romantic of the worker designer, that you were useful and you facilitating something directly. It's just the best feeling in the world. People say to me, okay, show me a piece of work you've done that's changed society. And for me, that's a ridiculous question, because society doesn't work like that. You put a poster up, people go, oh, yes, you're right about that piece of information. I'll change my point of view. If anything, Trump has shown us that people don't listen at all. Everything is relative. Everything is about emotion, feeling, and fitting in with what they think, not being changed. So I would never say I've done a piece of work which directly changes society. I think all you can hope to do is add to that voice of change. And that may sound a little bit pathetic or wishy-washy, but that's without ego. You are one of many who say something, and you have the tools to facilitate that. So better you say it and hope that there'll be change. And I do think, throughout history, protest works. There's nobody can deny that. Demonstrate. It may be long-term. It's long-term for the Iranian people, I know, and long-term for the Turkish people as well. But protest does work. Things get onto the agenda. Dictatorships fall. You've seen that with Assad. Society goes forward. And protest is a vital part of that, I think.
I wanted to ask you about your collaboration and your time as an art director with Adbusters, which was directly targeting anti-capitalistic movements and like designers, actually.
Yes, I think as well as making the world a better place, part of that, what designers should be doing is telling the truth. And most of the time we're instructed right from college to tell lies. So when somebody comes along and tells the truth as you think it is, then I would advise grabbing hold of them and working with them. And that's how I felt when I saw an issue of Adbusters. I couldn't breathe when I read it, or rather I could breathe because I could finally breathe again because somebody felt the same way. And for those listening who don't know, Adbusters is actually an advertising organization based in Canada. It's been around since about 1989. I think it was one of the first anti-advertising people. They really were trailblazers. And the main method pre-internet was through their magazine. I didn't work with them for a long time. I only did a couple of issues. And now somebody who worked on my studio called Pedro Inui is their main graphic designer. But again, it's that feeling of being satisfied that you're saying something which is important and relevant and true to what you believe. And one of the most interesting aspects about, it uses the same tools as the commercial thing. With subvertising, undermining advertising, you see it directly. But those tools are so effective commercially when they're turned against themselves to be anti-advertising, they're equally effective and quite shocking, I think. one of the very interesting things is that clients are frightened of designers with too many opinions. And certainly, I mean, people could say, suppose working for Adbusters because it's cool. It's not. I do it only because I believed it. I did it only because I believed it. And also because that's how I lived my life. There was, it wasn't a pose. When clients find out you work for that kind of company, they're actually quite scared because they don't want anybody causing trouble. Half of them suspect they're so enclosed in their world. Of course, they think what they do is really, really important. And to accept on a pragmatic level, it is, people have got to earn money in their jobs and employment. But on another level, it's useless what they're producing. We don't need it. So if you come up with an anti-advertising point of view, which asks, why are you doing this? That is the worst possible thing you could do. So it's a case of not worrying in that sense, that working and telling the truth. Of course, I can understand how graphic designers worry that they won't get any work, but you will find your place in design. It may not be in a big branding company, but you may hate that anyway if you're interested in advertising mode, but you will find your space within it and you'll attract the right clients. That's why you have to be honest in your portfolio in the first place, I think.
Talking about the graphic design aspect of things, and for example, you've done the branding for Art Basel in, I think, 2012 and 2013, and then again rebranding on 2018, if I'm correct.
Yes.
When you did the rebranding, was it the branding that you've put into place in 2012 that you've done the rebranding to, or was there a change after that?
Art Basel is our most commercial client. I think it's very much art based, of course, but it's art fairs, so it's towards the commercial end of what we do. But we're still trying to. There's still a belief somewhere of culture in there and interest in culture. For the first rebrand was done by someone else, another design company in Switzerland, and then we took it over in the long term, and then we rebranded. Yes, as you said. I would say, something like that is a much more subtle thing than going out and suddenly doing something new, like an album cover, because you have to you understand the history of David Bowie when you do an album cover, but you have to understand the history of something like Art Basel. So calling it a rebrand, it was a way of bringing modern design principles to something which people already understood. So not every design project has to change the world. Often being an intelligent designer is important as that, I would say. And we're still involved with Art Basel now. We do all the shows, which is quite a logistical job, as you can imagine. So.
And some of the brandings you've done is for projects, especially in Japan, for if I remember the name correctly, for the
Roppongi
Hills and Mori Art Museum. One interesting thing that I wanted to ask you about is that, let's say, for example, if I'm a designer living in Europe or if I'm a designer living in Asia and I have a really big client outside of my culture, what is it and what is your advice to younger designers in terms of understanding the client and actually delivering something that matches the culture over there whilst being on this side of the world? Because these days we get briefs and clients from everyone around the world, but the goal is to match that understanding.
It depends on the job, really. I mean, I think although Japan is a different culture, a very different culture to Britain, there's always been a relationship there with popular culture. They're really interested in British pop music and British designers. And I worried about that issue a lot when we started work on the project. How do we do something that fits in? And in the end, I think this is absolutely not the case for other jobs. But in the end, they've come to you because of the way you see the world, and they want a high-profile cultural project or visible project. So therefore, you have to do your best in the way that you would do it, not change it. Underneath that, and with other projects, you should absolutely understand or get someone in to understand the issues of language and culture to advise you about other stuff. But I think something of that level of visibility, it had to look different rather than fit in. And we've worked for other Japanese clients and clients in America, or Basel, Swiss, so it's a different culture. You should just be true to yourself in that respect as well. So you use the tools that are around you, the visual language that's around you, because it would be fake to do any other way. And then you have adjustment and discussion with the clients. So that's maybe not a very satisfactory answer, but
no, that's actually beautiful. In what you're saying, that the reason they come to you is that they want your design. It's
yes,
not about matching what is popular over there.
yes,
So that's really important.
point. But obviously, there are very, very commercial clients as well who come to you because maybe for the wrong reasons, like they're impressed that you're working in Europe and they want a nice, flashy European designer, and that's the wrong reason. I mean, one of the things that some clients will contact us, they say, "Oh, we want something like Apple design, something really sleek and clean." And my first, although I don't say it this directly, is, well, your whole structure isn't like Apple, so you can't have that kind of design because that design comes from the ground up of understanding how all the individuals work together and what they might produce. So, there has to be understanding of different cultures and understanding of company culture, but also that they've come to you because you do what you do, I think.
My favorite is when clients come to me and they reference a work that I've done for another big company. I got paid well, and they're like, "We want something like that with less budget." There is a reason that won't work because there was a good budget behind it.
Yes. I mean, good work takes time. And especially for a large client, it's, there are so many factors you have to worry about. And often graphic design gets into the press because people say, here's a logo, it costs $100,000. No, we don't charge $100,000. Let's get that straight. But because there's 3 years of work behind it and they've had to go through workshops, people don't see that. They just see a finished logo.
Yeah.
They sort of like aesthetically or not.
Yeah.
So it is, there's quite thorough work that goes on in branding, I think. Yeah.
Each designers such as yourself, iconic designers, they bring a part of the art of graphic design, the personal creativity into it. What do you think is the importance of bringing your character into even commercial works?
Well, on a selfish level, it's much more enjoyable.
Yeah, exactly.
Into it. But I think, what you kind of alluded to there was actually this history of graphic design. And I think you should understand your place in the history of graphic design. We're working in 2024 with a computer. You sit down at a computer, you've got 4,000 or 5,000 years of design history behind you, and your philosophy is influenced by all that. And most people don't even think of that when they sit down. I think it's important to know that what you're doing is actually quite similar to if you've been to Pompeii. There's posters on the wall where people have just drawn with brush lettering. It's the same process as doing a poster on a computer. Actually, you just stick it on the wall. So I think that acknowledgement, understanding and knowing your place in history is quite important. The thing is to, similarly as people come to you for your work, is to respect the knowledge you have, which is very difficult with some clients, but just, it's this very interesting thing. When I was a student, people would change their style completely dependent on the client.
Yes.
If it was a drinks company, it'd be different from if it was a bank, and it'd be completely acceptable to a piece of branding that was, over here, looked totally different to another piece you did over here. And that to me didn't make sense at all, because as a creative person or any creative person, they have a visual language which maybe they won't understand why they use it or where it comes from, but it's their fingerprint, it's their sense of self. And to try and suppress that doesn't make sense. I think the most interesting designers are ones where you can see a continuity of work, not the ones where, and this is something I tell students, don't have a portfolio which has got 5 different projects which you're half interested in. It's better to have 2 projects which you've gone deep into and actually look quite similar, because at least you'll catch people's attention with your passion, you know. I think also that thing I said earlier, you'll find your own space. People need to know your space to commission you because they're quite unimaginative. You know, a client tends to commission what they can see in front of them. Of course, designers are thinking people, and given a completely strange problem to solve, design problem to solve, they'll each want to come up with a different answer differently. But getting to the point where someone will ask you to do that weird problem is very, very rare. People tend to commission what they see. So if you want to do record covers, then you should have record covers in your photo. If you want to do books, you should have books in your photo. If you want to do typefaces, you know, you've got to have what you want to do. Otherwise, you're going to be wishing for the rest of your life that you'd be doing this work over here. But you can't, because your portfolio is full of this work, which is the work you're getting. You know, it's very problematic. I still talk today that tutors say that well, you have to cover all areas with your work. You don't. It's rubbish. The design is a big area. It's a very competitive area, and for both reasons, you need to specialize. And the best thing to specialize in is something you're into. You know?
Yeah, I think it's like a chain problem that sometimes companies are looking for a graphic design. The job title says we are looking for a graphic designer, and you read the info. They want a HR officer, they want motion designer, web designer. So designers also start putting everything on their portfolio. But it's a great thing that you mentioned, because I wanted to ask, like, as a founder of a really successful design studio, what if someone applies as a graphic designer to your studio today, what is it that you always catches your attention in their portfolio and makes them a standout applicant?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing I pick on, as you said, is a successful design studio. I mean, I don't think about that at all. I think about whether we do good work or not. So it's not defined with how successful we are, how much money we're making, or how much work we have. It's about whether the work has been done with integrity and honesty, whether there's something creative come out of which is, you know, new. That's more important than anything else. When someone sends a portfolio, there are a couple of things really. One is if they don't know the studio. I mean, you'd be surprised how many emails we get where it says, "To whom it may concern, I'm this person and this is my portfolio." And there's nothing to latch onto to interest you. You know, you've got to click on the portfolio, and that's because they're lazy. Honestly, they haven't bothered to research the companies to send their folio to. So often the portfolio coming is not in graphic design, or it's in an area we'd never do. So they're just wasting their own time, really. So they haven't done the research. They haven't bothered to find out who works at the company, and also they haven't said why they want to work with you. Occasionally you get, "Oh, you do really great work," but they won't say why. We're not looking for compliments. What we're looking for is a like mind, you know. So those things are very important. You've got to do research, find out who you're writing to, what they do, and why it connects with you. So we look for people who are interesting. And knowing what you do is important to a certain extent. The really important thing is that there's an independent, interested mind. So when someone applies for a placement, or we're thinking of taking them on, I'll look at their social media. Now, I'm not a stalker. I don't do that because I like their social media. I do it to see if they're interested in design. If they're spending all the time at parties, okay, that's fair enough. But if there's a bit of typography they've noticed, or they've been at an exhibition which is about design or art, it shows that there's a proper designer there who's thinking about design 24 hours a day. And you don't have to be a workaholic. You just have to have a design mind to think like that. So design is an all-encompassing job. It changes the way you think about the world, which is a good thing, actually, because walking down the street as a designer is a different process to someone who's a mathematician or something like that. And that should be reflected in the way you interpret the world and put images and messages out into it, I think. So.
That is a great advice for young designers. One last question that I always ask our guests is that if you had to pick your top 5 or top 3 influential designers for you, graphic designers, or in general, it can be visual artists that throughout your career or your personally just like their works.
Yes. I would tend not to pick graphic designers, honestly. And it's more about writers who've influenced me.
Okay. That's nice.
I mean, Hermann Hesse was quite one when I was young, and a lot of my, I got into trouble at college. I went to St. Martin's, which you think was a very arty college, but actually I didn't do the college projects. I started working on bits of text I loved and just making typewriter letters. They were useless, but that's what got me the work in the end that I'm doing now. So I tend to think it's about philosophy, and I'm trying to think of other people. I mean, I would say there was one person when I was younger who I just did a book on, actually, called John Foxx, who's a musician. He's also a collage artist. And he was very, very influential when I was young. He allowed me to enter into a world which was completely different from my own visual world. I come from a small town outside London, which was, wasn't the most beautiful of places. I lived on a public housing estate and rubbish, blowing everywhere. And he gave me an element of fantasy and escape. And so his visual work, his writing and his music altogether was very important. There's people like Duchamp and Kurt Schwitters, those people where they really played with the idea of what an object was. Because a graphic design is ultimately an object, a magazine, a book. And a creative person, I would think, you start at zero, you can rethink the whole nature and sense of an object. You don't have to say, well, this has to be a book, has to be this many pages, blah, 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 blah. So those people who have extreme points of view, I mean, there's so many. In terms of graphic designers, it was record cover designers. There's Neville Brody, Peter Saville, Malcolm Garrett, and Vaughan Oliver. I think we're all record cover designers who are working in a really personal way and expressing the music I find it, I have to say, I haven't worked with that many music artists, and that's because I only tend to work with people I really, really like. I love Bowie's music. I work with John Foxx. I love John Foxx's music. I work with someone called Gazelle Twin. I love her music as well. And I think if you don't like the music, it shows in the design.
Exactly. Yeah. I failed miserably, and I understood that because one time I had this client, a musician. I tried to basically do the same type of art that I've done before for another musician, and I couldn't do it. And that was,
you have to have that energy in the connection. Now, I mean, I've done a few. I won't name them, but they didn't go so well because I didn't feel connected to the music. Because if you're inspired, and it will show in the design. So I think all those, just get back to all those people, the designs I mentioned, all have passion, and they're all closely connected to one or two artists or record labels because they were there from the beginning, because they were part of the visual and the musical language of that artist or record company. I think.
Amazing. I would like to thank you for coming on to Stocks. It's been a pleasure hearing the story of your work and the amazing advice you have for younger designers. Thanks again.
Well, thank you. I hope it was helpful in some way, and I enjoyed it.
Definitely.